Please, close your eyes for just a moment. Take a deep breath and let your mind drift back to a cooler, crisper morning in the 1980s. Can you hear the metallic, rhythmic ringing of thousands of bicycles flowing like a river down the wide, tree-lined avenues? Can you smell the comforting, earthy aroma of roasted sweet potatoes mixing with the faint, sharp scent of coal smoke in the winter air? Today, we are going to take a journey back to a time that feels both intimately close and impossibly far away. We are going back to the China of our youth. We are going to explore 20 completely normal, everyday things we all did back then. Things that were just a natural part of our daily rhythm, but today, due to sweeping changes and modern laws, have become entirely illegal, strictly banned, or simply impossible to do. And I promise you, the very last memory on this list will bring back a warmth to your heart that you might have thought was lost forever. Back in those days, time simply moved at a different pace. It flowed slower, without the relentless, rushing urgency that dictates our modern lives. In the 1970s and 1980s, life was anchored not in digital screens, but in the physical reality of the hutongs, the communal courtyards, and the bustling, narrow alleyways. Some people today might look back and think that because we had less money, or because we lacked modern technology, our lives were somehow poorer. But we know the truth. We know that life back then was immeasurably richer in sincerity, in patience, and in true human connection. We shared everything, from our evening meals to our deepest worries, across low brick walls and shared outdoor sinks. Waiting for a handwritten letter from a relative in a distant province was a ritual of profound patience and joy. It was a world where community was not a choice, but a way of survival and a source of deep, abiding comfort. The rules were different then. The streets belonged to the people, and the boundaries of what was allowed were defined by common sense and neighborly respect, rather than strict municipal codes. Let us step back into that world together. And now let us remember the deafening, joyous roar of firecrackers echoing through narrow city streets and crowded apartment balconies. Back in the 1980s, especially during the Spring Festival, setting off massive strings of red firecrackers was not just a celebration, it was an absolute necessity. You could hear the sharp, cracking sounds bouncing off the brick walls of the courtyards, accompanied by the thick, unmistakable smell of sulfur that hung heavily in the freezing winter air. Children would run through the lingering smoke, their hands numb from the cold, eagerly searching the snow-covered ground for unexploded firecrackers, carefully breaking them open to collect the gunpowder. The ground would be completely blanketed in a beautiful layer of torn red paper, a carpet of good fortune that no one dared to sweep away until the festival was truly over. It was a communal symphony of noise, meant to scare away mythical beasts, but in reality, it brought neighbors closer together. People would stand on their tiny concrete balconies, laughing and shouting over the glorious din, comparing whose string of firecrackers lasted the longest. Today, due to strict fire safety regulations and urban pollution controls, setting off fireworks in almost all major Chinese cities is completely illegal. The winter skies are clearer now, and the nights are quiet. But sometimes when the new year approaches, you cannot help but miss that chaotic, thrilling, and deeply comforting scent of sulfur that meant the holidays had finally arrived. Let us turn our minds to the familiar, comforting sounds of live animals right outside our apartment windows. Keeping live chickens and ducks on the tiny concrete balconies of city apartments was an entirely normal part of urban life in the 1980s. You would wake up to the sound of a rooster crowing, not on a distant farm, but right next door, on the third floor of your concrete building. Families would feed these birds leftover grains of rice and vegetable scraps, eagerly waiting for them to lay fresh eggs or fattening them up for a special holiday feast. The balcony smelled of feathers and feed, a tiny slice of agricultural life suspended high above the bustling city streets. When a festival approached, the anticipation of having fresh meat was a joy that modern supermarkets simply cannot replicate. We shared this experience with our neighbors, sometimes trading eggs or sharing advice on how to keep the birds warm during the bitter winter months. Today, strict urban zoning and health and sanitation laws make it absolutely illegal to keep livestock or poultry on city balconies. The balconies are now filled with potted plants and drying clothes, peaceful and quiet. But the disappearance of those balcony chickens also took away a small, vital connection we had to the food we ate, and the shared, simple triumphs of raising something with our own hands. Think back to the heavy, dark stacks of honeycomb coal briquettes lining the dimly lit hallways of our apartment buildings. In those days, central heating was a rare luxury, and burning these cylindrical coal blocks was how we survived the biting cold of winter. The air in the stairwells always carried that sharp, slightly acrid smell of burning sulfur. Families would spend hours stacking hundreds of these briquettes outside their doors, creating small black walls that you had to carefully navigate around in the dark. We would cook our stews and boil our water on small cast-iron stoves that sat right in the hallway, sharing the warmth and the smells of dinner with everyone who walked by. There was a genuine danger of carbon monoxide, and we all knew to keep a window slightly open. But that little glowing red core of the coal stove was the glowing heart of our homes. The ritual of lighting the coal, blowing on it until the smoke cleared and the heat radiated outward, was a daily chore that grounded us. Today, for the sake of environmental protection and clean air, burning raw coal in urban residential areas is strictly banned and illegal. Our homes are warm now at the push of a button, and the air is much cleaner to breathe. Yet the sterile heat of a modern radiator lacks the soul, the smell, and the comforting shared ritual of tending to the winter fire together. Do you remember the stifling, breathless heat of a summer night before the era of air conditioning? When the inside of the house felt like an oven, entire neighborhoods would move their lives onto the city sidewalks. It was completely normal to drag heavy bamboo beds out onto the pavement. We would splash buckets of cold water onto the hot asphalt to cool it down, creating a thick, humid mist that smelled of wet dust and summer evening. Grandfathers would sit in their undershirts, slowly waving large palm leaf fans to chase away the mosquitoes, while the hypnotic sound of cicadas filled the night air. Children would run between the cots, chasing fireflies, before finally falling asleep under the open sky, surrounded by the murmur of adult voices discussing the day. It was a massive, impromptu outdoor living room where secrets were shared, watermelon was eaten, and the oppressive heat was defeated by community. Today, strict urban management laws and city beautification regulations make it completely illegal to block the sidewalks with beds or sleep on the streets. We now sleep in sealed rooms, chilled by silent machines, isolated from the night and from each other. That chaotic, beautiful communal summer sleepover on the concrete pavement is a magical experience that modern children will simply never know. There was a time when catching a ride meant something entirely different, a time when transportation was scarce and deeply cherished. Think about the thrill of hitchhiking in the open back of a massive commercial cargo truck. When buses were rare and personal cars were practically non-existent, piling into the back of a green Liberation truck with 20 other strangers was a completely normal way to travel between towns or even across the city. You would stand up, gripping the wooden or metal side rails with white knuckles, feeling the rushing wind tearing at your hair and the road dust coating your face. There were no seats, no seat belts, just a shared sense of adventure and a deep gratitude to the driver who let you hop on. We would bump shoulders with farmers carrying sacks of grain and workers heading to their factories. Conversations would spark over the roar of the diesel engine, forging instant, temporary friendships on the open road. Today, strict traffic safety laws make riding in the open cargo bed of a truck absolutely illegal, carrying heavy fines and penalties. We travel in enclosed, air-conditioned cars now, perfectly safe and perfectly isolated. We have traded the wind in our faces and the camaraderie of the cargo bed for comfort and security, leaving behind a profound sense of wild, unrestricted freedom. Let us recall a sight that was once common on every busy street corner, the open-air sidewalk dentist. Back in the 1980s, if you had a toothache, you did not always make an appointment at a sterile, brightly lit hospital. Instead, you might simply walk down the street to a local tradesman sitting on a folding wooden stool. These street dentists operated right there on the pavement, using foot-powered drills that whirred with a mechanical, clicking sound. They proudly displayed glass jars filled with extracted teeth as proof of their extensive experience. There were no latex gloves, no anesthetic injections, and no sanitized waiting rooms. You would sit in a weathered barber chair, open your mouth, and trust the skilled hands of a man who chatted with passers-by while he worked on your smile. You could taste the metallic tang of the tools, feeling the warm sunshine on your face as your tooth was pulled or your dentures were fitted. It was raw, immediate, and surprisingly communal. Today, practicing medicine without a license and performing dental work on a public sidewalk is, of course, highly illegal and strictly enforced by health departments. We are undoubtedly safer and healthier for it, but the disappearance of the street dentist took away a very specific kind of trust we used to place in the hands of our own neighbors. Think back to the glow of small fires illuminating the dark city intersections during the Ghost Month or the Qingming Festival. It was an essential, deeply rooted tradition to honor our ancestors by burning paper money and elaborate paper offerings right on the asphalt where the roads met. Families would draw protective circles on the ground with white chalk, carefully lighting the golden and silver foil paper. The air would fill with the solemn, heavy scent of burning paper and incense, while flakes of gray ash floated up into the night sky like silent gray snow. Older relatives would crouch by the flames, softly muttering prayers and sending messages of love and respect to those who had passed on to the next world. It was a beautiful public display of grief and remembrance, respected by everyone who walked or cycled past the flickering shadows. Today, due to stringent fire hazards, air pollution controls, and modern urban management rules, burning offerings on city streets and intersections is entirely illegal and heavily fined. We are encouraged to use virtual offerings or designated, distant facilities. The streets are cleaner now and much safer, but the night feels a little darker, a little more empty, without those small, glowing beacons of memory connecting us to our past. Do you remember the incredible balancing act of riding a single bicycle with your entire family? In the 1980s, a sturdy black flying pigeon or phoenix bicycle was the ultimate family vehicle. It was entirely normal to see a father furiously pedaling, while his oldest child sat sideways on the top crossbar. The mother would be seated on the rear rack, holding tightly to the father's jacket, and perhaps a small baby was tucked safely into a woven bamboo basket on the handlebars. 4 human beings, moving slowly and steadily through the city on 2 thin wheels. You could hear the rhythmic squeak of the metal chain and the cheerful ringing of the silver bell as the father expertly navigated through crowds of pedestrians. It was a wobbly, heavy, and deeply intimate way to travel. You felt the warmth of your family pressing against you, moving together as one single united entity through the crisp morning air. Today, modern traffic laws dictate that carrying multiple passengers on a bicycle like that is a serious traffic violation, deemed highly illegal and unsafe. We now strap our children into separate padded car seats in the back of automobiles. We are safe, and we move much faster, but we no longer feel that physical closeness, that shared effort of moving forward through the world together on 2 wheels. Let us take a moment to savor the memory of the massive, unregulated street barbecue stalls that would suddenly appear as the sun went down. Long before fancy restaurants became the norm, the best food was found on the pavement. A vendor would wheel out a long, rusted iron grill, load it with burning charcoal, and start fanning the flames with a piece of stiff cardboard. Within minutes, thick, fragrant clouds of white smoke would billow into the street, carrying the irresistible, mouth-watering scent of cumin, chili powder, and sizzling lamb fat. We would sit on tiny, flimsy plastic stools that were barely inches off the ground, drinking cheap beer from large green bottles and eating skewers straight off the fire. The oil would drip onto the coals with a satisfying hiss, and the noise of laughter and loud conversation would echo late into the night. There were no permits, no health inspections, and no ventilation hoods. It was raw, loud, and incredibly delicious. Today, sweeping environmental laws and strict food safety regulations have made these spontaneous, smoke-filled street barbecues completely illegal in urban centers. The night air is cleaner now, free of that heavy smoke, but the sterilized indoor dining experiences of today often lack the wild, flavorful soul of sitting on a tiny stool under the streetlights. Do you recall the communal effort of preparing a feast right in the middle of the neighborhood courtyard? When a special occasion arose, buying a live animal and slaughtering it at home was the only way to ensure the meat was truly fresh. It was perfectly normal to see a grandfather boiling a large aluminum pot of water on an outdoor coal stove, getting ready to pluck the feathers of a chicken or a duck. Neighbors walking by would stop to offer a hand, holding the animal or pouring the hot water, turning a household chore into a shared neighborhood event. The metallic smell of hot water and feathers, the intense focus on not wasting a single usable part of the animal, it taught us a profound respect for the food we consumed. It was a gritty, honest process that connected us directly to the reality of survival and celebration. Today, for very valid reasons of public health, disease control, and sanitation, the private slaughter of poultry or livestock in urban residential areas is strictly banned and completely illegal. Our meat now comes neatly wrapped in clear plastic on styrofoam trays from the supermarket. It is convenient and sanitary, but it has completely severed that ancient communal tie we had to the preparation of our most important meals. Think back to the sheer earth-shaking noise of a hand tractor driving straight through the center of the city. Back in the 1980s, the loud, deafening roar of a diesel walking tractor was a common soundtrack to our days. Farmers from the outskirts would drive these mechanical beasts, belching thick plumes of black smoke, right down the main urban avenues. They would pull wooden trailers piled impossibly high with mountains of green winter cabbage, bringing the vital winter food supply directly to the city dwellers. The entire street would vibrate as they passed, the distinct, rhythmic mechanical sound drowning out every other noise. City people would rush out with large woven bags, bargaining loudly over the engine noise, buying cabbages by the hundred to store on their balconies and in their hallways. It was a vital bridge between the rural countryside and the concrete city. Today, due to severe emission standards, noise pollution laws, and traffic congestion management, bringing a hand tractor anywhere near a city center is absolutely illegal. The grand avenues are now reserved for quiet, sleek electric cars and buses. The air is breathable and the streets are peaceful, but we have lost that loud, smoky, vibrant connection to the farmers who fed us. Let us remember the ingenuity of the makeshift kitchens that spilled out into the public alleyways. Space inside our homes was incredibly tight, so life naturally expanded outward. It was completely normal for families to build small, unauthorized brick stoves right up against the outside walls of their houses, encroaching onto the public path of the hutong. You would walk down the narrow lane and pass by women chopping fresh vegetables on wooden boards resting on windowsills. The sharp, rapid sound of a steel spatula scraping against a cast-iron wok would echo down the alley, accompanied by the explosive hiss of garlic hitting hot oil. The smells of 20 different family dinners would mingle in the air, creating a rich, intoxicating perfume of soy sauce, vinegar, and frying pork. You could literally taste your neighbor's cooking just by walking home. Today, urban beautification campaigns and strict zoning laws classify these outdoor stoves as illegal structures. They have all been dismantled and cleared away to widen the paths and improve fire safety. Our kitchens are now indoors, behind closed doors, equipped with modern hoods. The alleys are neat and tidy, but they are silent, stripped of the chaotic, beautiful symphony of the evening meal. Do you remember the distinctive clinking sound of the raw milk vendor arriving in your neighborhood? Before the days of brightly colored, sterile cardboard cartons, milk was a precious, raw commodity. A farmer would ride a heavy tricycle into the courtyard, carrying massive, dented aluminum churns filled with fresh, unpasteurized cow or goat milk. We would run down the stairs carrying our own glass jars or small metal pots. The vendor would use a long-handled ladle to measure out the milk, the thick white liquid splashing softly into our containers. The smell was rich, grassy, and deeply animal. We knew that as soon as we brought it inside, we had to carefully boil it on the stove, watching closely so the thick, creamy skin would not bubble over the rim. It was a morning ritual of care and patience. Today, due to extremely strict national food safety laws and the risk of bacteria, selling raw, unpasteurized milk directly from a bucket on a bicycle is entirely illegal. We buy our milk now perfectly pasteurized, homogenized, and chilling in bright supermarket aisles. It is incredibly safe, but it has lost that rich, complicated flavor, and the morning chat with the farmer who milked the cows just hours before. Think about the immense trust required to sit for an open-air street barber. Under the wide green shade of a large scholar tree on a busy street corner, you would find a man with a weathered leather strop and a shockingly sharp, straight razor. There were no sinks, no mirrors, just a wooden stool and a small basin of hot water. Men would sit back, closing their eyes as the barber draped a steaming hot towel over their faces. The air smelled of cheap, floral shaving soap and wet leaves. The barber would skillfully scrape the straight razor across their throats, shaving heads and cleaning ears with a delicate, terrifying precision, all while discussing the local neighborhood gossip. It was a masterclass in quiet trust and masculine bonding, performed right there on the dusty pavement for all to see. Today, stringent health codes, licensing requirements, and sanitation laws make operating a barber stand with a straight razor on a public sidewalk completely illegal. We now go to brightly lit, sanitized salons with sterile equipment and professional licenses. We pay for safety and style, but we have lost the simple, intimate luxury of a hot towel and a shave under the summer leaves. Let us recall the joyful, earthy tradition of foraging for wild vegetables right in the middle of urban public parks. When the harsh winter finally broke and spring arrived, it was entirely normal to see grandmothers and young children crouching on the grassy lawns of city parks, armed with small metal trowels and woven baskets. We were hunting for fresh shepherd's purse, wild dandelions, and bitter greens that pushed through the damp earth. You could smell the rich, dark soil and the sharp green scent of crushed leaves on your fingers. We would bring these humble weeds home, wash them carefully, and chop them up to make the most incredibly fragrant, fresh spring dumplings. It was a way to welcome the changing season and supplement our diets with the free gifts of nature, a tradition passed down through countless generations. Today, strict municipal park regulations explicitly forbid the digging and picking of plants, making this urban foraging completely illegal in order to protect public landscaping. The parks remain perfectly manicured and beautifully green, but they are now just scenery to be looked at, no longer a living landscape that feeds us and connects our hands directly to the earth. Do you remember when the streets truly belonged to the children, and a simple concrete slab could become the center of the universe? In the 1980s, it was incredibly common to see kids set up makeshift ping-pong tables right in the middle of a public road or a wide alleyway. We would find a flat concrete block or push two wooden desks together and use a row of broken bricks to serve as the net. The hollow, rhythmic, tock-tock sound of the celluloid ball would echo against the brick walls for hours. We played with cheap wooden paddles, dodging the occasional slow-moving bicycle or ringing the bell of a passing cart. The road was our playground, and the adults simply navigated around our intense, passionate tournaments. Traffic was so sparse that claiming a street for a game felt entirely natural. Today, the explosion of automobiles and strict traffic enforcement laws make playing a sport in the middle of any urban road absolutely impossible and highly illegal. The streets now belong entirely to cars, buses, and commerce. Children are safely fenced into designated playgrounds and indoor sports halls. We traded the wild, spontaneous freedom of the street for safety and order. Think back to the melodic, carrying cries of the scrap metal collectors wandering through our courtyards. Long before modern, colorful recycling bins appeared on every corner, recycling was a highly personal transaction. You would hear a man yelling, his voice drawn out in a rhythmic, sing-song chant, calling for broken copper, old newspapers, and empty toothpaste tubes. We would rush out, carrying stacks of old cardboard tied with twine or heavy iron scraps. The collector would use a traditional wooden beam scale, adjusting the sliding metal weight with an expert flick of his thumb. The transaction was always accompanied by haggling, exchanging our household trash for a few precious coins, or perhaps a sweet sugar figure for the children. It was a perfect, zero-waste ecosystem driven by human interaction. Today, tightly regulated waste management monopolies and strict municipal noise ordinances have made unlicensed scrap collecting and loud hawking in residential areas largely illegal. The streets are quieter, and our trash is whisked away by silent, massive trucks in the dead of night. It is efficient and clean, but we miss the familiar songs of the collectors and the small thrill of turning our old junk into pocket money. There was a time when the thick blue haze of tobacco smoke was an inescapable part of the atmosphere, touching every aspect of public life. Back then, smoking was not just a habit. It was an accepted social currency. It was completely normal to smoke everywhere. On crowded, swaying public buses, inside the cramped compartments of slow green trains, and astonishingly, even in the waiting rooms of public hospitals. The air was always heavy with the smell of cheap tobacco. Offering a cigarette to a stranger was the ultimate icebreaker, a sign of respect, and an invitation to converse. People would lean in to share the small, flickering flame of a wooden matchstick, cupping their hands together against the draft. It was a shared vice that incredibly, somehow, brought people closer in cramped public spaces. Today, sweeping national public health laws and indoor smoking bans have made smoking in enclosed public spaces, especially transport and hospitals, strictly illegal and socially unacceptable. The air we breathe is vastly cleaner, and our lungs are undoubtedly healthier. Yet the disappearance of that shared ritual also marked the end of a very specific, smoky era of spontaneous camaraderie among strangers on a long train ride. Let us remember the thrill of the spontaneous street markets that would blossom on pedestrian overpasses and busy street corners. If you had something to sell, whether it was a batch of duplicated cassette tapes, homemade winter gloves, or small plastic toys, you simply spread a plastic sheet on the ground and started shouting your prices. It was the ultimate raw form of entrepreneurship. The streets were vibrant, chaotic, and loud, filled with the energy of people trying to make a little extra money outside the rigid state system. You could haggle endlessly, feeling the texture of the goods under the dim streetlights. But there was always a tension, a constant lookout for the authorities. If the whistle blew, the vendors would grab the corners of their plastic sheets, bundle their entire livelihood into a sack in 3 seconds, and scatter into the night. Today, heavy-handed urban management laws and the fierce enforcement by the Chengguan have made unregistered street vending strictly illegal. The overpasses are clear, orderly, and empty. We buy our goods in massive, sterile shopping malls or through silent apps on our phones, missing the loud, thrilling, human hustle of the pavement market. Finally, let us recall the terrifying, exhilarating teamwork required to simply watch a television show. In the 1980s, owning a television was a luxury, but getting a clear signal was an extreme sport. It was completely normal for a father or an older brother to climb out a high window, balancing precariously on the slanted tiled roof, or even scaling a wooden utility pole to adjust the fragile metal antenna. The ritual was always the same. The man on the roof would twist the aluminum rods a fraction of an inch, risking his life, and yell down into the courtyard, "Is it clear now?" The whole family, crowded around a tiny, snowy screen, would yell back, "No, turn it more to the left." It was especially critical during the Spring Festival Gala, when the entire nation wanted to watch the same channel. Today, tampering with telecommunications infrastructure, climbing utility poles, and accessing rooftops without authorization is highly illegal and incredibly dangerous. We now stream our shows in high definition through invisible fiber optic cables, perfectly crisp and utterly effortless. We never lose the signal anymore. But we also never have to lean out of a window into the cold night air, shouting instructions to our fathers, bound together by the simple, beautiful desire to share a moment of entertainment. When we look back at these 20 vanished rituals, it becomes clear that we are not truly mourning the loss of the objects themselves. We do not miss the danger of the coal smoke, the lack of modern medicine, or the freezing wind in the back of a cargo truck. What we are really longing for is the profound sense of connection that those hardships forced upon us. We miss the time when our lives were intertwined with our neighbors, when trust was built on the pavement, and when joy was something we actively created together out of almost nothing. We miss our youth, and we miss the beautiful, chaotic freedom of a world that had fewer rules, but infinitely more heart. Thank you so much for taking this journey back in time with me today. If this video brought a warm tear to your eye or a smile to your face, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving this video a like. It helps us keep these precious memories alive. Now, I have a question for you. Which of these forgotten rituals brought back the strongest memory for you? Do you have a story about living in the 1980s that you want to share? Please, write it down in the comments below. I read every single one, and I cannot wait to hear your story.